Hi, my name is Shiv Malik and I'm from Streamr. So let me start by telling you just a little bit more about who I am. So, I'm a former investigative journalist for The Guardian turned now evangelist for a new data economy. This is me back in 2012. I deleted my Facebook account in protest during Facebook's IPO, and that made the news back in the UK around that time. When asked why I'd done this, I explained how Facebook had turned us all into info slaves. I was pretty angry then, but that was before Facebook broke traditional media and nearly destroyed The Guardian and with it my dream job. Then I got super angry. So I thought the best way to fight tech was, in fact, with tech. So I joined a group of developers back in 2017 from a project called Streamr. After pestering them for a while, they ended up building some underlying infrastructure as a side project almost, which potentially changes the data economy forever. I think it's pretty mind-blowing. What they've done is to make a thing called a data union possible. Glenn Weil and Jaron Lanier from Microsoft would call it a MID, a mediator of individual data, but obviously that's a bit of a mouthful. So we're sticking with the term data union for now. But you could possibly also call it a data cooperative. Perhaps actually that's technically the right descriptor. But for those who aren't familiar with what a data union is, then I'm going to explain it now. I think it's, as I said, pretty revolutionary. Well, a data union is perhaps a way, the only way maybe, of finally enabling individuals to own and control the most valuable asset of the 21st century, information. It might even take down platforms like Facebook. They say revenge is a dish best served cold, so I'm really looking forward to this taking off. So let me give you a ridiculously simplified and overview of the visions of the data economy as they stand at the moment. Over the last decade and a half, there's been a lot of talk about a fairer data economy. And with that has come sort of plenty of ideas and, as I said, there's visions. The first is perhaps the vision as espoused by the ODI. That's the organization that Tim Berners-Lee set up about 7-8 years ago. And what they talk about is open data, a world in which governments and also corporations and people just share the data that they have. You have data commons and everyone can sort of benefit in this very nice way. What they don't want is for that data to be monetized. The second vision is perhaps the privacy or death group. They can be very vociferous at times. In fact, I've counted myself as part of that group at one point or another. And groups like the Electronic Frontier Foundation have really been at the forefront of that. And what they have going for them is actually they've been able to make the tools to make privacy, a more privacy enhanced world more possible. So tools like, for example, the Brave browser or Firefox or I think even WhatsApp and Telegram are sort of caught hold with the public at large because, again, I think this is something that they want. And then obviously there's search engines like DuckDuckGo and the like. And even Apple and Facebook have kind of tried to get in on this notion. Then there's a third vision for the data economy, and that's been about the ownership model. And I think it was actually one of the original conceptions, I think, of the data economy, but it's sort of fallen aside. We're going to explore why in a second. But it's come back with a bit of a resurgence. We've got people like Andrew Yang, the Democratic presidential contender, and musicians like will.i.am, and Yuval Harari, the author of Sapiens, all these kind of disparate people, if you want, espousing some sort of new form of a data economy. And people, like I mentioned before, Glenn Weil, who's very much part of the sort of crypto economy, along with a few other sort of economic experiments, and Jaron Lanier, who also, I think, I would bracket in that ownership model. But they're, in a sense, it's sort of a bit of a disparate bunch of people, and it's interesting to see how those arguments are starting to come back. But despite all of this talk, we actually live with a fourth vision. It's none of those visions. It's actually this fourth vision that has won out. And that vision is of the panopticon society. It's a world of data oligarchs and data serfs, and data slaves even. The data oligarchs are people like Google and Facebook, Amazon, Twitter, Netflix, and they sit here, right in the middle of that panopticon. And the ordinary people are the serfs, and actually that's pretty much anyone who uses the internet. So if you use the internet, you're using it right now, well, you sit here. And you guys, I think, all know this, so I don't need to go into much more detail about how terrible this panopticon society really is. And remember, the panopticon was the vision by Jeremy Bentham of how to run a prison, but it also turns out to be a vision of how to, in a sense, run the entire information economy. And it's not just obviously corporations who've been in on this, it's governments too. I remember being in The Guardian when the NSA story broke, NSA and Snowden story broke. So, and I remember there being just this confusion in The Guardian because I think, the day before, if you told someone, hey, the government is listening to your phone, they can switch it on at will when they want, they're collecting huge troves of information from corporations around the world, and there's nothing you can do to stop them, people would have given you some foil to stick on your head and told you to go sit in the corner. The day after, when you told them, hey, by the way, we've actually now got the proof and the evidence that the government is collecting huge troves of information and listening to your phone and can turn it on at will and spy on you wherever and whenever they want, and people said, they just shrugged, and they're like, yeah, of course that's the case, right? Of course that, the government has always been able to do that. And there was no reckoning. There was no public reckoning, I think, between those two positions. And that's, I think, caused a lot of problems. It take, in fact, maybe those 7-8 years since Snowden broke for that really to sort of seep into the public discourse and for people to understand what it means and perhaps take up some of these pro-privacy tools. But I think that means you can't really trust now big tech, and you can't trust the state because they've got a massive involvement in actually ensuring that we still live in this panopticon world. And I find myself being, I come from a sort of somewhat peculiar political position, which is I believe in cooperation. So I'm a cooperativist. I believe in cooperatives and mutuals and those kinds of social organizations. So in a sense, I come with a sort of instinctive sense that power should reside in the hands of individuals, but individuals empowered to act collectively. That's where I come from personally. And therefore that ownership model, where people can own the data that they create, is for me most appealing. So people own their data and trade what they want, but what has bedeviled this vision of the ownership economy is that enabling individuals to own and trade their data is actually a huge, huge technical problem. So let me give you this example. I don't think anyone would necessarily know what this image is. Why would you really? But this is a slide it's a picture of a guy called Chris Downs. And Chris Downs in 2000 became one of the first people to certainly publicly sell his information. And how did he do it? Well, he did it on eBay, right? So he downloaded, I say download if you want, because actually some of it he had to handwrite, all of his information from all the repositories he could think of, including all sort of financial information, and put it on a zip drive and then sort of uploaded it to eBay. And he got, I think at the time he got about £150. It's roughly about $200 or so in today's money. And of course, I think that's roughly where we are today. If individuals want to sell their information, that's basically the infrastructure that's still available to them, and that's the only infrastructure that's available to them to be able to do this. And of course, that doesn't scale. Everyone who's watching this will know instantly that doesn't scale, it hasn't scaled, and it's never going to scale. So these are the sort of technical issues now facing those who believe in an ownership economy when it comes to data. So the first problem is obviously transport. You need to have some way of transporting real-time data from one place to another. And at the moment, there's no way for individuals to do that, right? You need a data delivery network. It's sort of the boring stuff, but if you want cars and you want trains, then you need to build roads and rails. right? It's not particularly sexy, but it needs to be done if you're going to succeed. It's the same thing with data. And the big tech companies have built all of this back-end infrastructure for themselves, but no one has gone and built it for individuals to use. So, yet. So that's the first thing. The second thing is, you need discovery. You need a way for people to be able to aggregate the data that they have with other people, because everyone knows your data personally isn't worth anything by itself, but stick it together with 10,000, 100,000, a couple of million people, and suddenly you've got a viable data set that data buyers are kind of interested in. So you need a way to aggregate that data. Then the second thing is that you need a place where people can come along and buy it, right? So the thing about eBay is obviously a data buyer isn't going to come along and buy Chris Down's data, my data, your data, all separately and try and negotiate with all of us. That's just impractical. You need one place that's easy to go to, where they can just click on a few buttons and it's done. Okay, so that second thing you need is discovery. That includes aggregation and a marketplace to actually discover all of that data, right? And then finally, then, people need to get paid, right? I mean, you might go, hey Shiv, well, what's the problem? You know, people have monetary systems out there. Well, look, we're all in the crypto community, so you probably know that this inherent problem is that you need to make micropayments, right? So you need to pay 1 million people a couple of cents every day, every week. And you can only do that with crypto. In fact, you can't even do it with Ethereum right now, right? Because it hasn't scaled to that point. So actually we needed to devise, and we did devise our own solution for that too. So yeah, the Streamr team solved it. We solved these 3 essential problems. And that's mainly because I think we happened to, as a project, be at this really great conjunction of both real-time data and crypto. I think you needed those skills to come together. We had experience in all of those things, or the team did. And so we've now built the outline of both a decentralized, permissionless, end-to-end encrypted network for transporting the data, a data marketplace for discovery, and because we had experience with crypto, we were able to build this sort of micro payments backend. Here's a technical outline now of what's going on. Well, firstly, the data goes in at one end and is transported through a decentralized, as I mentioned, transport network built for real-time data. And that data is unlocked by a data buyer when they pay. And all of this is governed by a smart contract. And everyone here is familiar with smart contracts, so I don't have to go into that. So that's the kind of very basic overview. But note that the data source goes directly to the buyer, right? There's no centralized party involved. I think that's very important if you're going to garner trust in this kind of new style data union, right? So it isn't just going to, let's say, Facebook again, or centralized company, and that centralized company then tries to sell it on your behalf. This is that direct transmission of data from the producer of the data, that's you and me in this case, to the buyer, and then the buyer, when they pay, the payments go directly back to us. I think that's really, really key. I'm going to give you an example of an application that has in fact already been built. It already has 800 at the time of this recording members. Probably by the time this comes out in January for the conference, it probably have more than 1,000 users already, making it one of the most popular dApps out there already. And that first application is called Swash. It is in fact the world's first data union. The app owners of Swash are a team in the Middle East. They're actually based out of Turkey. But what is Swash, right? It's a browser plugin or extension that works now in Chrome, Firefox, and Microsoft Edge, and Brave. Users send their data direct to that network, as I said. It's all bundled into one product on our marketplace. And when the payment happens, the app builders can take a maximum of 30% of all revenue as governed by the smart contract. And I think that's really important. So they do get rewarded for building this. And obviously it's also a business because they're going to have to find more users for Swash, and they're going to have to find buyers of that data, right? And for that work, they are remunerated properly, up to 30% of all the transactions that go on when the data is purchased. And that's basically how they generate revenue, which is why there's an interest in anyone doing this in the first place. And I think you need that incentivization. But essentially, they're representing, therefore, the interests of their users in that way. But in that quite decentralized way, as you've already seen from the technical outline. And the union members obviously get the rest. So they get at least 70%, if not more, of all the money that's spent buying the end product, which is the data. So let's see this in action. If you want to follow along, go to swashapp.io. And now I'm just going to show you a live demonstration of all of this. Okay, so we've gone to swashapp.io, and now I'm simply going to just get Swash. So I'm going to click on this button over here, and it's going to send me to the Chrome web store. I'm going to add the browser extension to Chrome. Click on that, come up with a dialog box, and obviously you can read that. It's a pretty standard dialog box, and that's obviously done by Chrome itself. So I'm going to add extension. You'll note that it doesn't actually modify any of the data, but you'll see why they put those permissions up shortly. Swash is now being added to my browser. So I click on that, and this is the first box you'll see. Obviously, I've just downloaded it, so data here is our cryptographic token, and obviously I've earned nothing so far because I've just downloaded it. There are a few other buttons here, but we're just going to click on settings for the moment, and we'll see that pop up. And now I'm just going to give you a quick tour of what's inside. First of all, you'll see earnings. You'll see that it spins up a wallet address already and your private key within the app, so that's really handy. We can talk about how to withdraw data in a second, but basically the back end is it's a system called Monoplasma, which is a side chain. So it keeps, because the money is the amounts are so small and they're done in micropayments, it's not worth withdrawing them until you get to an amount that exceeds the transaction cost of Ethereum. So that's why it's done on a side chain. Next section is the choose data to capture section. And the modules are switched off, all except search by default, but we're going to just switch them all on so we can take a quick tour of what's inside. The first is the Amazon module. So obviously when you go to Amazon, other people will be interested in how you behave and what you do and the information that therefore you produce, like the items in your cart. So people who, if you search for a particular book, let's say you're a bookseller on Amazon, then people will know, well, why didn't you actually convert and buy that book, and what items did you in fact then go on to buy? All of this is information that Amazon has in rich detail, but it's not information that other people who are also sellers on Amazon have in that same detail. So it's very useful to them to be able to collect this. And that's why we've given the option for you to share that data with the data union. Now, let's also then now look at the Facebook module. You'll see, again, similarly, there are a selection of things that you can share or not share. I don't use Facebook, obviously, and I'm going to just click on the likes, let's say. That's perhaps maybe the only thing I'm comfortable with is sharing what I like on Facebook, but nothing else. And remember, obviously, you're going to be sharing information about other people through this, in essence. Let's look at the search module. The search module captures your activity when you use a search engine such as Google or AOL or Yahoo, etc., etc. I don't know anyone who uses Yahoo anymore, or DuckDuckGo. And you can pick up things like the search query. So what did you actually search for? The search results. Again, this is information that's interesting for people because Google has it, but it's actually not very accessible as to when people search, what are the actual results that fit with that? And the clicked link. So what did you actually search for versus what did you then go on to click? So if I'm Nike and I want to know, well, hang on, why did this guy then go on to click on the Reebok shoe? Like, what was that process, right? That end-to-end process. So it's actually really unique information, and almost no one out there has this kind of information and if they do, they're doing it behind users' backs. There is a company called Avast who do the antivirus software, but it turns out they're spyware. And they do sell this information to other people through a subsidiary called JumpShot. But Swash does it over the table and is doing it with your consent. And I think that's really, really important. And obviously in this decentralized way. Finally, let's look at the surfing module. People often forget, that's how the web started, right? You kind of surf with the URL bar. I'm going to just go and actually do that right now. And I'm going to go, let's say, I'll go to The Guardian. you'll see The Guardian now pop up in my browser. Let's go back to Swash. You can see the kind of things you can click on and share with the union, including the page information. Let's just go to the data here. So now this is the collected data module. And you can see I've clicked on The Guardian, and therefore there's a number of data points around theguardian.com, including that redirect. You'll note that I had guardian.co.uk, but it's obviously redirected me to theguardian.com. I can click on this, and you can see that's the kind of information that is being sent, including the user ID. That's my user ID that's attached to that data. We'll come on to that in a second. But also, obviously this is all machine readable information by necessity. Also some metadata here. You can see the title of the web page and what it does: news, sport and opinion from The Guardian's UK edition. Now, you probably noted at this point that there's a little bit of a ticker. And if we click on the delay data send feature, we can increase the time that it takes to send this information to the data union. So you can give yourself those extra couple of minutes, say 5 minutes, to think, hang on, is this something I really want to share with the outside world? You've got a delay there, and that's quite handy for preserving privacy. I'm actually, and you can also just delete the information if you want, and I'm just going to delete it all here, and then it's gone. Nothing has now been shared with the data union. Let's go back to settings. I just want to show you this module at the bottom here. This is one of my favorite features. It's the set global privacy level, and this is basically a privacy slider. So let's put this on low. At low, you basically end up sharing just about everything. And remember, what this is about is trying to unlink your personal identity with the browsing habits and the information that you generate in the online world. Because those two things don't need to be interlinked, right? I think what's really important in today's society is the reason why those things are interlinked is because of advertising. Advertisers want to target you directly. But actually, we all know that there's lots of uses for metadata out there in the world, and it doesn't need to be all about targeting you then afterwards for advertising. So that's why Swash has been set up in this way, right? And there's the more privacy you want, and the more, in effect, you want to unlink your personal identity with the behaviors you generate online, then the more this will facilitate it for you. So on low, you'll find that they have the full URL bar, so not just theguardian.com, but the specific pages that you've clicked into, the time strings down to the last second, and all the text, etc., etc. If I click on medium, things start to get masked. The time string is down to the day and not to the hour and the second, and the URL starts to also get masked as well. If I put it on high, then very little is shared then with the data union in terms of who exactly you are and information that might be used to link the information you generate with your identity out there. And we're working on several other features to ensure that this is really genuinely enhanced. Okay, so let's just click on advanced. I can add specific words into this feature, which is the add a text mask. So if I don't want the data union, if I'm surfing around and I don't want anyone else out there to know my name in particular, I might want to just add in my name here and my personal address, maybe my phone number. I might well Google those two things. You can also, it comes by default, it masks out things like Dropbox, Google Docs, etc., and specific login pages. It won't be able to view your passwords and the information that you insert onto a page except for that which you permission. And that's really, really important. But you might not want Slack at all to appear and be shared. So you might want to put that down as well, for example. Okay, that's a tour of the module. There's a help section as well where all of that information that I've just spoken about is contained. But let me just show you now the marketplace, which is where you can buy this information about Swash. So this is what the buyer would do. And it gives you an insight into really the kind of end product that you're creating. So I'm going to go to that Streamr's marketplace. I've typed in Swash. I'm going to now purchase this data stream, and really because it's real-time data, you get a license for, it's a time-based license that you're really purchasing here. So I'm going to go for 1 hour. That's going to cost me just a couple of cents at the moment. That price will be much higher when there's more people involved in this and you're generating a data set that's really worth something. I'm using obviously MetaMask here to sign in and to purchase that data. It's now being written to the blockchain. Hopefully that won't take too long. Let's just see how fast Ethereum is at this time. Great, so now that transaction is complete, and I'm going to now go to Core. Core is Streamr's tool for data analysis and visualization. This is the table of the data that's coming through. So what you're seeing here is the surf stream, and this is basically all the information that comes through from 800 people's user habits. So it's really fascinating information, obviously, and stuff that buyers will want. You'll see on the right-hand side, there's the identity, which is masked, and it's given a kind of specific user ID hexadecimal string. And then you can see the data that's sort of starting to flow through now, including the various timestamps. I think, look, this is the kind of fascinating stuff that when it scales will just add massive amounts of value to the data economy. So I'm just going to go back to my presentation now. Okay, so let me now just go through some of the benefits of a data union, right? So the first thing is obviously that you can own and monetize your own data. I think that's pretty obvious. You've seen how that now functions. But really with that, in a sense, you're claiming your property rights, right? I think that's really, really important. You're claiming your property rights and earning money from that data. And I think there's a really interesting discussion to be had about how if you want a more privacy-centric world, actually claiming ownership and doing it through property is the way to go, not by claiming it as some kind of human right, but saying, look, this is mine, you can't have it, you can't see it, you can't use it. That's a much, much clearer way, legally speaking, along with, I think, ideologically speaking, of actually claiming that privacy. So it's really important, but there's more. The second point is that we're now demonopolizing data sets, and I think that's really fascinating. So imagine, the dominance of someone like Google is because they have a monopoly over, let's say, the people's location data, right? Which powers Google Maps, right? If anyone wants to compete, they're going to have to get at least 40 million people or whatever in the US, or something like 10 million people in the UK to get that kind of data that feeds into a decent map app. Well, that information is being generated by us, not by Google. And yet they reap all the benefits. So if you can demonopolize data sets like this, and you can have just a raw, if you want, flow, a sort of fire hose of location information, then anyone can come along and build a map application on top of that data set. And I think that's really good because it's setting innovation free. Third point and final point is that really by doing this, we're kind of enabling new business models. I think that's really fascinating because it's not just the individuals who can be incentivized in this way to share and aggregate data and reap the rewards. It's also the application owners out there. There's tens of thousands of apps, mobile apps out there in the world, and a lot of them sit at this midpoint where they don't know how to monetize their data. This can help them to do that. They might also feel uncomfortable monetizing the data behind people's backs. Now they can do it over the table. In fact, I'd like to see some of the big giants actually revenue sharing with their users. That's really where I think this is leading. So I'll end on that note. Thank you very much for joining. I've enjoyed this all, and have a great conference. Hi, so thank you so much for watching that presentation. I'm now going to answer a few questions. I've picked 3 from the list that was sent to me. So the first question is, what kind of values can data unions make, and what should we do to sort of solve that unequal distribution of those values that are kind of created
the values created from data unions? So it's a good question. So I guess there's two ways of looking at it. The values are kind of the ethical sort of dimension, but also the monetary dimension. So let's just look at it from the ethical dimension first. And I would say this, that, we did some market research about data unions, and we also basically asked people, look, is this something that you want? And they said, absolutely. And we really do want to, by the way, get paid for sharing our data. And that was a really exciting find. But actually, the biggest thing that we found was that people want a sense of control. At the moment in the data economy, people feel like, they don't have any say. Things happen, they have to click on a button, every time they go to a website, but they don't know what's going on. And they know they don't know this. And they have no control and no say over what's going on. So anyone who gives them a sense of control is really thanked. And they want to feel like, they can determine where their data goes, who monetizes it, and they want to share it. They just want to share it, like knowing who they're sharing it with and why. And I think that's really, really important. There's going to be winners and losers in this new sort of data union economy, if you want. I can see now with the EU and what they're doing with this new Data Governance Act, which should be published actually in a couple of weeks, that they want to make these organizations really accountable to ordinary people. So these new organizations, call them data unions, data cooperatives, will have a legal duty to people who produce data, and that'll make them, when it comes to brokering data and selling it, that'll make them kind of tied into those user interests rather than the interests of outside investors or Silicon Valley or someone else, right? So that's very exciting, and in a sense, our tech, and as you can see from the presentation, enables that ecosystem to grow. And yes, there'll be winners and losers in terms of ordinary people. But I think, the pool of the winners will just be so much larger. So some people won't want to join a data union, just like some people don't join labor unions. It's the same sort of deal. And if you're in it, great, you get the benefits. If you don't, then you won't. It's really simple. And I think the proposition is very clear in that respect. So, I hope that kind of answers your questions. Actually, let me just go back to that point about so who are the losers going to be? I guess it's people who don't want to monetize, people who don't want to share, who want to retain a sense of privacy. And also people who, those can be kind of the richer people, who don't need the extra $10 or $20 a month that they might make from joining a data union. But they can also be sort of poorer people who don't, in a sense, are not digitally integrated. And I think from the perspective of people in Korea, there's a lot of opportunity there for people in Korea, in South Korea, to go to embrace this model. You're all incredibly digitally literate, one of the most digitally literate societies in the world. So I expect that ordinary people will want that sense of control in their lives and to be able to also make money from it at the same time. Okay, second question. As a My Data player, are you worried about competition from new entrants, or do you welcome them? So we build infrastructure for data unions, data cooperatives, as you've already seen. We don't build these data unions ourselves. We just help other people do that. So we absolutely welcome new people coming in to this space. And if real-time data is what you're about, and creating these kind of collective organizations that help monetize it, then great. We are for you. We want to talk to you. We want to help you. And it's all open source. So we're here for you. So we very much welcome the space growing and growing larger week by week. And the final question is this: is there any advice or message that you would like to tell for kind of Korean small, medium enterprises interested in this? Well, yeah. So two things, really. I would say the first thing is that, if you already have an existing digital platform and you're interested, so whether that's, a mobile app or something that's just desktop or something like that, we're here for you. We're here for you. Why? Because if you want to start monetizing your data, or you want to monetize it in a way that's far more collaborative, great. We can help you do exactly that. We can integrate into your already existing platform, and then you can start paying users for the data that they generate. And therefore, they're far more willing to say, yes, I'm very happy for you to take that data and be my agent in the world and monetize it for me, and you also get a cut. The other thing is that we're also working closely with mobile network operators. Because we want to start these things afresh. There's a lot of data around. We need agents and organizations who already know how to monetize this data. And we can give them the tools to help them do that, to get this consents from users, to get what we call rich consent, to help them pay all of those users. That's also really complicated, and to make sure that the data moves in a way that ensures privacy for those individuals. So we can help with all of that. And the second group of people, so that's the first group of people who already have existing digital platforms. The second group of people are the people in the My Data conference, in a sense, the people thinking, what are the new opportunities out there? Where is the data economy growing? We know that we've been told time and time and time again, data is the new oil, it's the next biggest thing. Well, yeah, okay, it is. It's true. It's worth billions. The biggest companies in the world are powered by data. No doubt. If you want a piece of that pie, right, how do you get in now? And I think the sustainable way to get in to the data economy is working with the people who generate the information. And when it comes to consumer data, that is the consumers. That's you, me, everyone in this conference, ordinary people, using Facebook or Twitter or LinkedIn or whatever it might be. If you're using those platforms, great. That is consumer data. And that is information that you as a kind of SME can start to harvest, share, and monetize on behalf of those users. So reach out. We're here. Thank you so much for inviting me to the conference. I know this is strange because it's not live. I'd love it to have been live. But thank you so much. I really appreciate it.